Hi everyone, welcome to Homespun, where creativity and community come together. I am your host, Misty Doan, and I'm so excited to be joined by Jemima Flendt of Tied with a Ribbon. She's going to share her journey from being a home economics teacher to a quilt pattern designer, and you're going to love getting to know her. Jemima, thank you so much for being with me today. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling everyone a little bit about you?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to actually be here. It's been a long time in the making,
I know,
so
we have been dreaming
very
this
excited.
Up for a while now,
Yeah,
a couple years.
a long time.
Yeah.
That's right. So, well, my name is Jemima Flendt, and I'm a quilt pattern designer, teacher, and author, and I'm based in Perth, Australia. So, yeah, a little fair way away.
Exactly, and that explains why it took a bit of time to get you over here.
That's right.
But you came into town for QuiltCon.
That's right. It's been so exciting to be able to do some things previously and then come to spend the week with you here.
I'm so thrilled it worked out. So let's talk a little bit about your background and how you got started with quilting.
Well, I was actually a high school home economics teacher.
Oh my gosh, how awesome.
So I was in the classroom for many years, and teaching has always been at the really root of what I do, and I'm so passionate about getting people started in quilting, and teaching has really just been that way that I've been able to, through my business, grow and connect with quilters all through the world.
I love that. I love that you were a home ec teacher, because I had a fabulous home ec teacher growing up. I remember her name, Mrs. Eubank, and she was wonderful. And it makes me sad that that's kind of fallen by the wayside. Is it the same in Australia, or is it still?
It has done, yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, a lot of the textiles has been sort of made way for commercial cookery and that with our students, and being able to offer that for them. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously times change, and we have to pivot and adapt. But I love that you've been able to repurpose, what you taught in the classroom, and to then you kind of bring it into what you do now.
That's right.
Really cool.
I really sort of love how the skills that in the classroom that I've been able to use really are just the same in terms of teaching people how to quilt and getting them started on their own adventures, so that they can really learn and grow and love and have success with quilting, because that's how we get more people in our community.
Absolutely. So what first brought you to sewing? Is it something you've always done your whole life?
Yeah, I come from a very crafty family, and my nan taught me how to crochet when I was about 7 years old, and she would always start me off in the middle, because I could never do that, and I would use all the yarn and all the scraps that I could to continue to make the crochet blankets. And when they got big enough, she would start me off all over again. And
so sweet.
Yeah, and my mum, we grew up with her making our clothes, and really getting into quilting came about because my baby sister at the time was getting a room makeover, and there were all these scraps left over.
Okay.
So I picked them up, I took what Mum had in her sewing room, and I found a magazine, which was the Better Homes and Gardens, and a quilt pattern in the back, and I set about with my scissors and with what I knew on the machine, just making my first quilt.
How fun. How old were you then?
I was 16.
How cool is that?
And only a few years ago, Mum came over and she actually handed me that quilt, because I didn't know she actually still had it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
You're going to have to send us a picture so we can show that, because how amazing.
So, just that whole, and whilst it's absolutely, not perfect by any means, but it's just so important in that journey of quilting, and things, have changed. I didn't know how to bind a quilt. I didn't know that there were rotary cutters and all those sorts of things.
Absolutely. Well, and Jenny, my mother-in-law, often talks about how, those first quilts, we should honor them, because it's part of our journey and part of what's got us from there to here.
Yeah.
And how special that you still have it and can look back on that.
No, I think very much in terms of working a lot with beginner quilters, that first quilt is really important. And I think sometimes we get, often embarrassed, or we're sort of a little shy with our skills at that point.
Yes.
But really being able to sort of look back on that as well in your journey of quilting is really special and should be celebrated.
I think so too. And maybe you can speak to this, since you've taught in the classroom as well. But I think one of the things that as adults we forget is that the process of learning a new thing it means that there's going to be mistakes and failures.
That's
and
right.
I think we get this expectation of perfection that's just really not possible.
That's right.
So do you want to speak to that a little
Yeah,
bit?
very much in my classes we talk, and I sort of set everyone up with that premise that you just need to give yourself some grace when you're here to learn, and when you're starting out, it's not going to be perfect. And I'm very much in the classroom trying to sort of put onto the students and anyone who's coming along that it takes all those steps to get to a product that you love and enjoy, and you don't have to sit there unpicking every little stitch and enjoy that process whilst you're going through it, because it's really that learning process will push you on to your next one, and seeing that success and actually having that finished product wants you and pushes you to want to go out and get another project and start on your next one, and especially then gifting it or giving it to someone and having that experience where you can see that appreciated or loved
Absolutely.
or used. Yeah.
Well, and I think the other flip side of that too is typically when you give a gift that you've put so much work into, they don't see all the imperfections that you see. They just see this
they
wonderful
love
thing.
it regardless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then I think it's a great reminder to us that, oh, we do need to be nicer
Yeah.
to ourselves. We need to just enjoy this process because it should be fun.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
No one's actually looking harder at those quilts than you are yourself. So you definitely don't need to worry, because everyone's middle is different. Everyone starts at different places, and yeah.
One of the things that I loved after QuiltCon, I saw someone share online this thought that she will always consider herself an intermediate quilter, because if she decides she's an advanced quilter, then she's done learning.
Yeah,
right.
I love that.
I loved that thought too, and it's such a good reminder that we should all be eager to learn
Yeah.
and looking for those opportunities to
That's
learn
right.
more.
Yeah. Well, in a recent classroom, I was teaching a beginner's foundation paper piecing class, and I had asked the students before, who has done any of it or who has done some before, and I was very surprised to have quite a number of those people who were there had already done it, and they were quite advanced, but they came, and what they were telling me was that they were there to learn something that they didn't know. They were there to learn tips. They wanted to know things that they didn't know yet
Yes.
about the actual technique. So I just was so surprised in that willingness to come and learn, and people are so eager to actually learn what isn't necessarily written in the pages of patterns and designs, but pick up all those little tips and tricks that you actually get that you would have to write a whole encyclopedia for to include them in a pattern.
Exactly.
So it's so great.
It's so true, because sometimes just the act of doing things, in rote and on repeat, we pick up these little habits and tips
Yeah.
that we don't even necessarily know how to articulate until you're teaching or they're in a
Yeah.
space with people.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
being able to share those is so great.
That's it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love talking also to the students and participants is that there are really a lot of ways to get to that end journey in quilting. It doesn't matter if everyone's doing that 10 different ways. It's about finding what you love in quilting and finding the way forward that you love to do it. So it doesn't matter if I show you this particular way. If you find it easier or you've done something previously before that gives you that knowledge, then absolutely, we all end up in that same place. And it doesn't matter which road we take to get there.
I absolutely love that thought, and it's so true, because we often hear no quilt police here.
Yeah.
But that's a stronger way to say that. The whole point is that we should be enjoying the process.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, and there's no right or wrong way.
That's it.
From A to B, from person to person.
We all hold our pencil differently, but we all can write beautiful things. And just the same way, in our quilting, we all can do it differently, but we all get there together at the same.
Exactly, and we can still, once the project's finished, we very rarely say, how did you make your half square triangles for that? We don't really care, you know? We just want to enjoy the beauty of the finished
Or
project.
quite often where people are asking because they want to learn other ways to do something as well. Yeah.
Exactly, that's true. If you're in a classroom setting, I was just thinking more of when you're admiring the finished work, you don't really care how they did it. You just want to enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's so true. So let's talk a little bit about how you made the shift from a classroom teacher to sharing online.
Yeah, I had actually been doing my classroom teaching sort of role had sort of gone down a little bit with my home and my family life, and I was teaching some classes through in a local store, and what had happened was I really had to come to that point where I had to make that decision: do I go back into teaching full time, or do I actually give my business and Tied with a Ribbon a real go? And it was a hard leap to make because it sort of took away that whole safety net of, you know, a full-time job and all that for my family.
Right.
But it was just something that I was so passionate about in quilting, and I loved the aspect of teaching so much within it that I knew that I could always go back to teaching if I wanted to, but I just never saw that teaching quilting was going to end up for me being, you know, and have me teach, you know, around the world and
Right.
have me do those sorts of things. So yeah, it was definitely a leap of faith at the time, but it's all, you know, it's been hard work.
Oh,
You know, to
absolutely.
get here, and there's certainly times where you just sort of wish you were back in the classroom because, you know, those sorts of things are easier sometimes to sort of switch off at the end of the day. But no, I've absolutely, you know, just loved my journey through quilting and the people that I get to work with and the students that I meet. I wouldn't change that for the world.
Absolutely. So what was the first thing that you kind of did that like was your first step into your business?
So I really started out with pattern writing,
Okay.
and I think that was that natural progression from teaching, in that I saw the pages of pattern instructions really as a way to teach
Okay.
people how to make that, and that's always why I've loved writing very much essentially beginner focused patterns so that you understand those simple things, because quite often you can pick up a pattern and not necessarily know things when you're starting out in quilting.
Yes.
So I really try to include a lot of that little detail in my patterns and the things that'll help you, maybe that sometimes are just assumed that you know how to do. So I started out with writing patterns and teaching them, and then the first book, like I worked very hard on, I wanted to write a book and
Sure.
have that manuscript picked up, and then it sort of, things continued to sort of snowball from there. So
That's awesome.
by the time I'd written my first book and it was out, I was already writing my second book. And definitely in terms of how I've connected mostly with people is through social media. So a lot of people as well, I was connecting through Instagram and through, you know, all the social media channels, and that's really how I've continued to grow my teaching that way as well.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And one of the things I love about, you know, the internet and social media in general is that it opens up this audience that you wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
before we sat down to talk about this, you mentioned that, you know, about half of your audience is here in the States,
Yeah.
which is incredible.
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
been sort of so interesting to sort of see that journey, being Australian, and also sharing my love for quilting, you know, through Australia and New Zealand, and being able to do that, but also then to share it with my audience here.
Sure.
Because the amount of faces and that for people, you know, at QuiltCon and that come up and say hello, and you've never met them, but you've been chatting to them online.
Yes.
And, you know, it's so great to finally meet those people. It's just,
true.
you know, and people will come up to you, and you don't necessarily know them, but they've followed you and your journey, and they're so open to showing you what they've made from your work. So that connection is just, yeah, it's indescribable, really.
It's really special. It really is a beautiful thing to be able to connect with people from all across the world through this shared love and
Yeah,
hobby that we
that's
have
it.
in quilting. Yeah, it feels very unique and special to what we do.
It does. It's nothing that I've ever taken for granted, and it's just, yeah, really like amazing to, you know, be sitting here even.
Oh,
And
that's very kind.
yeah, but it's
true.
it's
I
true.
mean-
It's
I mean,
it's hard work to,
Yeah.
you know, keep up doing it, and I think a lot of people sometimes, you know, other things call them, but my pursuit really to continue to reach beginner quilters and to share that love that I have for quilting has just really driven me forward in being able to continue to want to share.
I love that. Well, speaking of share, you brought some of your projects
Yes.
with you. So can we look through
Yes,
some of those?
we can.
And I love it.
All right. Start with this one at the bottom. All right. So this here is one of my earlier patterns, and this is called Aurora. And this is half square triangles. And this was, yeah, out of the beautiful Alison Glass collection that released several years ago. But really this is such a fabulous way for people to start out in quilting, because you really become quite proficient in your half square triangles. And then you've got the beautiful colour, how it sort of ombres out.
Yes.
But with the repeated quadrant pattern, it really means that you're not necessarily actually putting lots of blocks together, and you're able to practice and really hone in those skills as well. So,
Oh, that's
yeah.
beautiful. I
Yeah.
love that. those little threads.
Yeah, it's traveled a long way.
Yes, oh, that's gorgeous. And this quilting pattern is beautiful as well.
So this kind of also then just started through COVID, there was kind of this whole, well, suddenly things had really changed for us where we were living, and things in stores had changed as well. And always having crocheted during the pandemic, it was really, I decided that I wanted to pick up my crochet again. And having this quilt sort of out, I realised how similar this was to the crochet designs that I had been loving. So as just an actual experiment, what I did was I took this particular quilt pattern and then I actually turned it into what has become known as my Merriweather blanket, which is the exact, the crochet version to this quilt. So
how fun is that?
and it was just, I absolutely love handwork. I love crochet. I love hand quilting. But this was just an experiment that people saw me doing on Instagram because I was sharing it. Because especially through that time, like making those connections was really so much more valuable than I think we'd ever realised before.
Exactly.
And then people were asking me, like, was I going to release it as a pattern, and was I going to, do something with it? And at that time, I hadn't actually ever released an actual crochet pattern.
Okay.
So that kind of started a whole nother side to my business with crochet, and this kind of was the first. And it's gone on to what became then my third book.
I was going to say,
as well.
You wrote a book, right?
Called Quilt It, Crochet It. And all of those patterns are actually, there's a quilt and then there's a blanket or a crochet project that is the exact replica.
How fun.
So I've brought some of those as well.
That's awesome. Let's see.
So we've got here, this is the Rebecca quilt. And in this particular book, I actually chose to honour the very important women who have had an impact on my, not just my career, but in terms of those women who had really spurred me on in continuing to pursue my quilting.
Yes.
So this is the Rebecca blanket. Within the book, I've got projects named after my mum and my nana, and some of the very most important women in my life who have had special roles in that. So it was really, that was a really beautiful thing that I wanted all of them. So this again is a half square triangles project, and this is actually on the cover of the book. And then this is the actual crochet blanket version. That way.
They're so beautiful.
So each of the projects were replicated in exactly the same way, even with the colouring. And one of the most beautiful things that actually came out of this third book was so many people have come up to me afterwards and said that they quilt, but their sister or their mum or their aunt or someone else in their family crochets. And many of them have been working on the same project and then have swapped
with their own
it.
medium.
Yeah, and then been able to swap and been able to share their stories for that. So that was something I never saw coming.
Right. Kind of
and that connection people would have with it. But yeah, so that's
really
the Rebecca
sweet and
blanket.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I have often said that crochet so far has been the nemesis of my craft
Yeah.
journey. I have yet to master it.
Yeah. We all have one. Mine's knitting.
Is it?
So
See,
yes.
I can knit, but I struggle with crochet. But I love everything that is made with crochet. So someday, I am going to make it happen. But these are so beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. So then we have one more quilt behind us, and I know that you'll be teaching this as well.
Yeah, I'm so excited to do that. So.
And this one's called Endgame.
Endgame, yeah. So at the time I was listening to a lot of Taylor Swift.
I love it.
Yeah. Not the movie. And it also featured on the cover of a magazine when it was released, and it really has been that quilt that sort of, it got reposted and kind of was one of the first ones of mine that really sort of took on that new sort of level for me. And people, it's one of the ones that I love to teach because it really just gets people into equilateral triangles and shows them that they're really, you just have a few tips and tricks that once you've learnt those, makes it so much easier to work with. But yeah, Endgame is absolutely one of my favourite quilts.
Oh, I love that. Well, I truly thank you so much for making the time to sit and talk to us. And so before we sign off, I would love if you would just maybe leave some encouragement for someone who is considering making the leap into
Yeah.
a quilting business or a crafting business?
Yeah, well, definitely. And for me, what I would say is absolutely keep working hard at it, because it isn't easy, but with encouragement from all those people, just trust what you're hearing rather than what you're sometimes thinking.
Yeah.
And just absolutely, if it's your passion, we want you in our industry. We want,
Yes.
we want new people to share what they love to do with quilting. So
Exactly.
keep going. Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. It's so true. We are better when there's more of us who are
Exactly.
excited about
Yeah.
the work that we're doing. So if you don't mind, will you remind everyone where they can follow along and keep
Sure.
up with what you're doing?
Well, you can find my website over at tiedwitharibbon.com. Over on Instagram, I'm also at Tied with a Ribbon, and I absolutely love to connect with people over at Instagram, and all the other fun social channels you'll find me on as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jemima.
Thank you.